let's talk about fishing windows. For the average Final Fantasy XIV player, there really isn't much to think about. You're probably vaguely aware of the time or weather requirements for fish, namely the fact that they exist at all. But let's not kid ourselves here. What pretty much everyone is actually doing is just looking at one of the trackers, and 99% of the time, it'll never go much deeper than that. 99% of the time. Last year, I found a period of time slightly longer than 24 hours where all 30 legendary fish spawned in one day. Since legendary fish windows can be really rare and spread out, I thought it would be fun to make this a bit of an event, so I put together a spreadsheet of all the spawn times, made a train with the Carbuncle Plushie Fish Train tool, this thing is great by the way if you've never used it, and managed to catch an absolutely absurd 20 out of 30. I made a video about it where I said the mental toll was so intense that I would never do it again. Well, this year, Forpus, another Fishcord user, found an even better, actual, sub 24 hour period where every legend spawned. So, I did it again. I put together a spreadsheet and threw it out into the world for people to use. I wasn't really planning to make any video about Legendary Day 2026 at all because I've already done 2 videos about these sorts of fishing challenges, and I'm not really sure there's much for me to add here at this point, but I was not expecting it to be as big as it was. This wound up being colossal. Literally everywhere I went there were crowds. People were fishing everywhere. The official account even posted about it afterwards. At first I assumed it was because a few big name creators were involved, but even when I was at completely random spots nowhere near anyone famous, there were still always people. And this wasn't a planned event or anything, it was just something cool happening. It had the vibe of the entire neighborhood going outside to look at the Aurora Borealis or a meteor shower or something. Sometimes Final Fantasy XIV doesn't really feel that much like an MMO, but this was one of the most incredible, weird, social moments I've ever experienced in it. And it was fun to spend the whole day fishing with friends, so quick shout out to Emiok and Chaos for hanging out with me for literally like over 18 hours. But I'm not going to make a video about how my Legendary Day went, because, again, I've already done that, I have nothing really new to add, and it is absolutely not because I did way worse than last time and I'm salty about it. That's not it at all. It's not. It isn't. Instead, I'm going to talk about my big contribution to the festivities, the spreadsheet of every spawn. Specifically, this tab right here. Behold, the Advanced Sheet, a catalog of interfering bites and secret extra windows, kept tucked away because this information could prove dangerous to the novice fisher, or even deadly. Deadly. But what does all of this stuff mean? And how would you look it all up yourself? And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Step with me out of the bright sunshine of the better world you live in and into the pale, clammy darkness of advanced fishing knowledge. Let's learn about alternate windows. First things first, let me just define a few key terms for people who might not be too up on their fishing. Big fish are basically the boss fish of each individual fishing hole. There's over 300, and if you need it put in terms of like combat content, you can think of them as roughly ranging in difficulty from dungeons to normal raids. A lot are forgettable, a few are surprisingly intense, some are memorable and fun, and some are miserable slogs. Legendary fish are savage raids. It's not unusual for it to take actual IRL months to catch some of these, either because of extremely low uptime, especially complex mechanics, or they're just huge jerks who hate you personally. I'm going to spend most of this video talking specifically about legendary fish, but I will be sure to clarify if I do mean regular, non-legendary big fish. Alright, now let's start talking about alternate windows. I'm going to break this down into 3 broad categories of interesting things going on: alternate window times or lengths, window-dependent interfering bites, and fisheye windows. Per the 24-hour clock, the weather changes at in-game times of 0, 8, and 16, or midnight, 8, and 4 p.m. Any fish that has both time and weather dependence, whose uptime crosses these boundaries, can have what is commonly referred to as a split window, where only part of that fish's total window is available at once. Whether or not it is possible for the entire thing to ever be available depends on the specific details of that fish's weather requirements, such as if it needs a specific weather transition and if it's possible for that weather transition to have the same weather type on both sides. Split windows can be extremely straightforward, like for cicada. It's available from 1530 to 1630 in umbral wind that was preceded by fair skies. Since the weather changes at 16, that means it's actually up either 1530 to 16 or from 16 to 1630. Many similar symmetrical windows exist, like Endoceras, which is up from 20 to 4, but they can also be split unevenly, like Helicoprian's 8 to 20. More on those two later. You can also get some very funny extremes, like the non-legendary Big Fish Celestial, which is up from 7 to 17, meaning its window is either 23 minutes long or 2. Split windows can also affect fish indirectly, usually via mooch fish or fisher's intuition. For the real novice fishers, mooching is a basic mechanic where certain fish can be recast as bait. Those fish can have their own time or weather restrictions. Fisher's intuition is a more complex mechanic. It's essentially a buff that needs to be active in order for you to catch certain fish, including many legendary fish. It's triggered by catching a specific combination of other fish in the same fishing hole without fishing in another spot or leaving the zone. The fish that trigger Fisher's intuition, again, can have their own time or weather requirements. For example, Kuno the Killer is technically always up, but it needs Fisher's intuition triggered by catching Canavan. Canavan is available in Gloom from 8 to 18, meaning it can be up for either 23 minutes, 5 minutes, or that full time, depending on how the weather works out. Warden of the Seven Hues has something similar. Green Prismfish is up in Clear or Fair Skies, preceded by Fair Skies from 0 to 16. So, in conjunction with the Red and Violet Prismfish, which have simple time requirements, the setup can look like one of these three options. I personally like this arrangement the most since it means my attempts are more on the order of 20 minutes than 40, but it does lead to more botched Warden attempts. There's trade-offs to everything. Of these listed topics, split windows are the easiest to look for because they're obvious on the tracker, and 9 times out of 10, you just want to be fishing in the window that's the longest. But sometimes, there's danger lurking beneath the surface, hidden where you can't see it at all. Interfering bites are a fact of life in big fishing. There's sort of two different definitions of what an interfering bite is. One is just another fish that is difficult or impossible to distinguish from the one you're trying to catch. These are usually deliberate tripping hazards that are always there and are baked into the design of the fish, like Basilosaurus rex eating your triple hooks during garlic this prep. A second definition is a fish that is only present under specific circumstances, which, as a result of being there, reduces your odds of catching what you want. Looking at the example of Warden from the last section, fishing for red and violet prismfish when green prismfish is in the pool is more difficult because green prismfish bites fairly often, so overall you'll get fewer of the bites you need when it's around. Sometimes, these two different categories will overlap. Helicoprion and Endoceras that I mentioned before have straightforward window splits. Each also has an interfering big fish bite, the kind that you can't really tell apart. Magic Carpet for Helicoprion, Coelacanthus for Endoceras. In both cases, the two sides of the split window have different levels of interference. For Helicoprion, it has long windows from 8 to 16 and short windows from 16 to 20. The long windows have interfering Magic Carpet bites starting at 9, while the short windows are completely carpet-free. Endoceras, on the other hand, has Coelacanthus interference on both sides of the split. But in the 20 to 0 window, Coelacanthus is up for 2 hours from 22 to 0, while on the other side, in the 0 to 4 window, Coelacanthus is up from 0 to 3. So you have more time without interfering bites if you're fishing in those pre-midnight windows. Now, how do you spot the potential for this kind of window-dependent interference? That's a very good question. An easy approach is to check on something like Teamcraft and see the list of all fish in the fishing hole, and see which ones have timers on them, since you know those ones have some kind of timer weather condition. Check your target fish's conditions, and then check through anything else with a timer, and see if it can bite under the same time and weather conditions and on the same bait. As an example, let's look at Halo. The legendary fish here is Problematicus, but as we can see there's 3 other fish with timers: Lava Lord, Lava Snail, and the Lord of Lords. The conditions for Problematicus are clear or fair skies from 10 to 15, which does not cross one of our 3 weather transition times, so there are no weather splits, and it is mooched off of a granite crab, once you have Intuition. And Intuition is triggered by catching a bunch of fish that are always available. Lava Lord is up in clear or fair skies from 9 to 17, and it also bites on a granite crab, so that completely overlaps Problematicus. As an added headache, it is a ferocious strength 3 exclamation point bite, making it full direct interference. However, since there will always be Lava Lord bites during Problematicus windows, this is baked into the design and we can just kind of ignore it. Lava Snail is up in clear and fair, but it bites directly on Magma Worm and not the Granite Crab mooch, and it has a fairly low bite rate, so we are not gonna be too concerned about that one either. Finally, the Lord of Lords is caught off of the Granite Crab mooch and is caught from 8 to 16 in clear or fair. That is preceded by clouds, dust storms, or fog. So this does overlap with Problematicus, but has a tighter weather requirement because of that transition. This means that while some Problematicus windows will have Lord of Lords present, others won't. Problematicus windows without Lord of Lords available will be slightly easier, since that's one less interfering ferocious strength bite to confuse us and waste our time and mooches. There's a few other fish that have this sort of only occasional interference. Opabinia is up during thunder at any time. The interfering Allagan Blade Shark is also up at thunder in any time, as long as that thunder is preceded by clouds. For a non-legendary example, the Archbishop is a Stormblood fish which has a simple time requirement of 12 to 16, and it's one of only 2 fish to bite on its bait, as long as the weather isn't clouds or fog. As a quick sidebar, a very common question for fishers is, does weather affect the bite rates of fish? And the unsatisfying answer is usually something like, not really, it's complicated. This is why it's complicated. Weather doesn't directly affect any fish bite rates, but because it adds or removes other fish from the pool, it sort of does, indirectly, sometimes, for some fish. Now the thing is, even once you know that there is potential for interference, looking this stuff up on the fly is a huge pain. You either have to be looking up details on specific windows in a dedicated weather tracker, which is annoying, or you have to be constantly cross-referencing the windows of the different fish in a fish tracker, which is also annoying. There's really no way around it but looking in advance whether some specific window you want to target is going to be good or not. This is actually a big part of why I made that sicko mode spreadsheet, because a huge amount of what it's tracking is these interfering windows. And sometimes what is or isn't considered interference changes over time. For example, Xenacanthus, which is up daily from 16 to 20, wasn't really considered to have much weather-dependent interference when it was added in Stormblood. It's mooched off of a hardhead trout, which has the exact same simple time requirement as Xenacanthus itself. Up until the release of Dawntrail, it didn't really matter too much that in clouds and fog, an additional, fairly rare fish called Munefish was added to the pool. However, if you surface slap the very common steelhead trout, hardhead trout becomes the only powerful hookset preferring fish in the pool, meaning that the level 100 skill Ambitious Lure gives a huge boost to its bite rate and makes it significantly easier to catch. But that boost is significantly blunted if Munefish is up, because Munefish is also a powerful bite and will become significantly more common. This didn't really matter much until that skill was added to the game. If we take a step outside the realm of big fish entirely, you'll see something similar if you've ever tried to farm Thunderbolt Eel for Gatherer's Scrip. So this is a great example of how new skills can go back and recontextualize older fish, sometimes in really fascinating ways. Of course, no skill in the game goes back to recontextualize older fish quite as much as Fish Eyes. Fish Eyes is a skill that eliminates the time requirement for any non-legendary fish from 2 expansions ago or earlier. So as of Dawntrail, that means fish from Shadowbringers and before. If a fish has time requirements and weather requirements, it removes the time requirements but leaves the weather requirements intact. It is hard to get across how absurdly powerful a skill Fish Eyes is. It can unlock insane amounts of additional uptime, ranging from relatively trivial boosts to absolutely absurd 12 times uptime multipliers, to simply turning any fish with no weather requirement into an always up fish. People really need to respect this skill more. So while Fish Eyes doesn't work on legendary fish directly, many legendary fish require some sort of interaction with a time or weather requiring fish, either as a way of triggering Fisher's intuition or as a mooch bait. In these cases, it's generally pretty straightforward to see how Fish Eyes is used. You can catch the relevant fish a little early using the skill, and that way you can trigger intuition more easily when the time comes, like with lancet fish, or you can pre-stock some swim bait mooches, or at least try to, like with Xenacanthus or the Greater Serpent of Ronka. But the thing is, if you use it right, Fish Eyes actually does open up entirely new windows for certain legendary fish that weren't there before, even though it technically doesn't affect them directly. Both Stethacanthus and Aquamaton are actually up daily, but their availability is highly restricted by one of their intuition requirements. In the case of Aquamaton, Shadeshifter, which is up from 10 to 14 in gales after clear or fair skies, and in the case of Stethacanthus, Sculptor, which is up from 12 to 18 in thunder. Note that Sculptor crosses one of our weather transition times, so Sculptor also has split windows that can be long or short. Obviously, I prefer these longer windows, but sometimes you have to make do. Anyway, with the power of Fish Eyes, suddenly a number of additional windows for these two fish become available due to the rarer intuition fish gaining additional windows. Does this make it easy? For Steth? Definitely not. Double hooking Sculptors under Fish Eyes is a brutal GP sink, and probably more of a challenge than doing it normally. Catching Shadeshifter even during the regular window is a pain. Getting it under Fish Eyes isn't exactly easy, but it's at least comparatively fairly straightforward. Warden of the Seven Hues' interaction with Fish Eyes is also pretty well known, since it's often used as a way to grab extra violet and red prism fish if you didn't manage to get everything you needed during their natural windows. But you can also use Fish Eyes to squeeze in more green prism fish windows, since they do have a time requirement. Since Warden itself has no time or weather requirements at all, it will start biting as soon as you've finished building its massive intuition, no matter when that happens to be. You can also actually do the same thing with Kuno the Killer and Canavan, although since Canavan is up so often, this doesn't really matter in any significant way. When Fish Eyes presumably gets extended to Endwalker with the release of Evercold, there probably won't be any interesting uses like these, unfortunately. The only Endwalker legend that has a real interaction with a timed fish is Sidereal Whale, and it's just going to be that Felina it becomes always up, so nothing too funky. There isn't really a good way to spot interesting Fish Eye legendary interactions that isn't just looking at the relevant fish and thinking about it, unfortunately. Probably the best way to do it is to hang out with a bunch of more experienced fishers, because that's how you pick up bits of fish trivia that aren't even on any of the normal trackers or sites, because they'll just confuse people and cause problems. Like, for example, did you know that Shonisaurus is technically always up, but since Mahar, its mooch fish, has a weather-only requirement, this really only matters in the sense that you can always mooch out a Mahar no matter how late you reeled it in. The Final Fantasy XIV fishing rabbit hole goes astonishingly deep. I've heard people say the real primary skill in fishing is knowledge, and even just knowing there can be this kind of variation between windows is one example of that. And like, I'm sort of presenting myself as an expert, but I'm just some random person, and it's pretty likely that while I put together that Legendary Day spreadsheet, and even in the making of this video, something has completely slipped my mind, and I'll only... And I completely forgot this about Lystracanthus. Okay, so to explain a bit, because this is like esoteric knowledge, Lystracanthus does not actually have a weather transition requirement, just time and fog. But the Jaws of Undeath you need to mooch to catch it does require that transition. So this is something that basically never comes up. And this is an example of the kind of thing that does actually get deliberately kept off of the trackers to avoid people mass reporting the fish for being impossible. But I completely forgot to check for this on Legendary Day. Was there a super secret bonus Lystracanthus window? Not really. Nah. I guess you could kind of hold a mooch across this. Nah, you get one shot, and it's a slippery fish, so the odds would be pretty bad. So, not really, no. You know what? I've never actually tried this. How viable is it? Can I catch a sneaky illegal bonus Lystracanthus? Okay, I'm all set up. Let's see how this goes. Hey, I got a Jaws already. This is working pretty well. And another. And yeah, last cast magic. Okay, let's go. Slip. And hell yeah, a highly illegal fish eye Lystracanthus catch. Can I get 2? Hell yeah, that's 2. Alright, that felt surprisingly viable, but also there is no way I can ever in good conscience recommend that to people as an approach. That's like a fun challenge run thing, not like a strategy for actually trying to catch it. If you deliberately exclude viable Jaws of Undeath windows, you're basically forcing this to be a triple or quadruple weather chain, which puts us into some really funny territory statistically. Just as like a naive back of the envelope calculation, I think this adds like a maximum of 0.7% uptime to a fish that has 2% uptime already. So that'd be like a pretty trivial gain in any case. And to even take advantage of it, you need to know how to use specialized weather trackers to even be able to spot these windows coming. So that seems like a pretty good spot to end this. I hope you learned something, maybe gained an appreciation for how deep that fishing rabbit hole goes in this game, and maybe I'll see you out there next time there's some other crazy Legendary Day happening. Or not. Here's a video of me slipping a bite that was guaranteed to be a ruby dragon. That really hurt.